Shocking, female prisoners in high-security prison get pregnant en masse, and hidden cameras recorded the entire. Inmates become pregnant one by one in a women's prison when they decide to investigate and find out why everyone is shocked. Dr. Beatrix stared at the ultrasound monitor with wide eyes. In more than 10 years as a doctor, she had seen many strange things, but this was completely unexpected. The image on the ultrasound screen was clear and unquestionable, and her mind desperately sought a logical explanation for what she was seeing. A deep silence filled the small room. Beatrix tried to disguise her expression of surprise and confusion as she wrote down some information on the patient chart. When she was finally able to think of what to say, she called the female guard who was waiting at the door. "Claire, could you call the supervisor, Camille, please? Tell her it's urgent," the doctor asked, trying to maintain a professional tone, but the urgency in her voice was evident. Claire, the guard, frowned but didn't question it. She just nodded and left quickly to fetch the supervisor. While they waited, Beatrix turned to the patient, a young woman called Lillian, who was sitting on the gurney, restless and tapping her fingers nervously. Her eyes showed the same confusion that Beatrix felt. "Doctor, I don't understand much, but that thing on the screen, is that really what I think it is? Am I really?" Lillian stuttered, unable to finish her sentence. Beatrix took a deep breath and confirmed it. "Pregnant. Yes, Lillian, you're pregnant. But the question is how? How did you get pregnant here in this place? Please explain yourself. I need to understand how it happened." Lillian looked down at the floor, trying to avoid the question. Her discomfort only increased when the door opened and Camille, the supervisor, entered the room with a serious expression and firm steps. Camille was confused to see the expression of discomfort on the doctor's face. "What is it, Beatrix? What's going on?" Camille asked. Looking from Beatrix to Lillian, trying to understand the seriousness of the situation, Beatrix pointed to the ultrasound monitor, which was still on. "Here, look," she said, already anticipating the supervisor's reaction. Camille approached, and her eyes widened when she saw the image. "No, it can't be. She's pregnant." "But how? She's the third this week," Camille asked, incredulous. The doctor and the supervisor exchanged glances that reflected the same doubt and confusion. "This is serious, Camille," Beatrix replied, crossing her arms. "We can't just sit here and do nothing. Something is going on." Camille ran a hand over her tired face, clearly trying to process the information while she read Lillian's medical records. The women's penitentiary where they worked was extremely strict. There were no intimate visits allowed, and contact with the outside world was controlled. "That's impossible. There's no way an inmate could get pregnant in here," said Camille, shaking her head. "But you're right, something very wrong is going on right under our noses." Lillian, the young inmate, listened to the conversation in silence. The doctor looked at her with a serious expression, and she began to tremble with nervousness. "Lillian, I'm only going to ask you this once," said Beatrix, trying to keep her voice calm and soft. "How did you get pregnant? Who's the father?" Lillian began to sweat, her hands clenched as she tried to come up with an answer. "I don't know how it happened," she said, her voice shaking. "I didn't do anything, I swear. I don't know. Please don't ask me anymore." Beatrix and Camille exchanged a meaningful look. Something was very wrong. The young woman clearly knew something and refused to say what it was. The supervisor, already impatient, locked arms with a rigid posture and approached Lillian as if the sheer pressure of her presence could extract an answer. "Listen here, Lillian," began the supervisor, her voice firm. "You're the third woman to appear pregnant here, and only this week, which means that something is going on here in the penitentiary, and we need to know what and how. Now tell us, girl, how did you get pregnant?" Lillian recoiled, startled by the sudden confrontation. "I told you I don't know, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. If we're done here, I'm leaving," she said, getting up from the gurney abruptly, clearly shaken by the pressure. Before they could stop her, Lillian walked out of the door accompanied by the guard, leaving the doctor and the supervisor with no answers once again. Camille leaned on the table as if looking for the strength to continue standing, while Beatrix closed the door with a heavy sigh. "What's going on here, my God?" Camille muttered, trying to make sense of the situation. Beatrix just shook her head, equally confused by the whole thing. "I'd like to know too. This is a women's penitentiary. How can a prisoner get pregnant here? It's impossible. Something's going on, Camille, that's for sure." Camille wiped her hand across her forehead and agreed. "That's no coincidence. 3 pregnant women in 1 week. There has to be an explanation for that." But what Beatrix and Camille didn't know was that the mystery of the pregnant inmates in the women's penitentiary had only just begun. Over the next few days, tension increased inside the penitentiary. Unanswered questions tormented Beatrix and Camille, who spent hours debating possibilities. Who could be responsible for these pregnancies? How is this happening without anyone noticing? Camille decided to call a meeting with some of the prison staff to discuss the suspicions and try to find new clues. Gathered in the small conference room, the security team and other employees listened attentively as Camille presented the situation. So far, we have 3 women who turned up pregnant last week. This is a serious problem. We need to find out how it's happening, Camille explained, crossing her arms. Claire, one of the guards responsible for the inmates, scratched her head before saying, "I spend the day with these women, and I've never noticed anything suspicious. They spend the day in the cafeteria or in the courtyard doing their chores. I don't understand how they got pregnant." Beatrix agreed. "And there are no intimate visits allowed here. Contact is always supervised. Everything is monitored by cameras. That makes it even stranger." There was a heavy silence in the room until another guard, Claudia, mentioned something that caught everyone's attention. "What if it's not someone from outside? What if it's someone who's already here working with us?" Camille exchanged a glance with Beatrix. The idea was disturbing, but it made sense. "Do you think an employee could be involved? I'm not accusing anyone, but we can't rule out the possibility. Perhaps someone is taking advantage of a gap in the routine to meet the women away from the cameras," suggested Claudia with a cautious tone. Camille took note of the suggestion. "Well, all the security staff and the other cleaners and canteen employees are women. The only man here is Mr. Adam." An even deeper silence fell over the room. No one dared accuse the old man of such a thing. He was a well-known, kind, and charismatic gentleman. Mr. Adam was the guard stationed at the gate at the entrance to the penitentiary, and during the 20 years he worked there, he never had much contact with the inmates, or so everyone thought. A seed of doubt was planted in Camille's mind, and she decided to review all the camera recordings from the last few months. Later, in the monitoring room, Beatrix and Camille reviewed all the recordings they could. They watched every corridor, every corner, looking for anything that might go unnoticed. The work was exhausting but necessary. During one of these recordings, something unusual caught Beatrix's eye. "Camille, look at this. Doesn't it look strange?" In the footage, Lillian, the last inmate to get pregnant, was walking down one of the corridors, and right behind her was Mr. Adam. The two of them entered another corridor where the toilets were and where the camera couldn't reach, and after a few minutes only Mr. Adam returned. Everything seemed very suspicious here. "Strange. Why did he go to the inmate's bathroom? He has a bathroom in the guardhouse," said Camille, puzzled. "Do you think he could be, responsible for all this?" Beatrix asked with her heart in her hand. None of them wanted to believe that Mr. Adam could be the one to blame for all those pregnant inmates, but he was the only male employee there, and suspicion fell on him. Before jumping to conclusions and accusing someone of something so serious, the supervisor thought it best to talk to Mr. Adam, but to her surprise he was on leave. "Oh, Mrs. Camille, I had to take some time off. The doctor told me that I have urinary incontinence and that I need to take care of myself. But as soon as I get better, I'll go back to work," said the old man when the supervisor called him. Since all the employees were outsourced, Camille didn't know when they went on vacation. The news of Mr. Adams' leave removed any suspicion about him, as the old man had already been away for almost 2 months when the first pregnant woman showed up. In the call, he also explained that he started using the inmate's bathroom when the guardhouse bathroom was under maintenance, and with his urinary incontinence problem, he couldn't hold it in, and it was his only option. Camille was relieved to learn that poor old Adam wasn't responsible, but the mystery remained, and as if fate were conspiring against them, a new bomb fell into their lives. Just a week after the last pregnancy discovery in the prison, Beatrix appeared in the supervisor's office with hesitant steps. Her face was pale as if she had just received some disturbing news. "Camille, you won't believe it, but," said Beatrix, still in disbelief, "we have another case, and this time it's Joanna." The look Camille gave Beatrix was a mixture of surprise and despair. Joanna was a striking figure in the prison, known for her intimidating attitude and the influence she exerted over the other inmates. She was an imposing woman with a strong presence and a rigid countenance. Her stern gaze was enough to make anyone look away. "We need to talk to her right away," said Camille, getting up hastily. Beatrix nodded, and together they headed to the courtyard where Joanna was usually at that time of day. When they arrived, Joanna was already waiting for them with a defiant look on her face. With her arms crossed and one eyebrow arched, she looked ready for any confrontation. The other inmates around them were whispering to each other, exchanging curious glances. "Joanna, can we talk in private for a moment?" Camille asked, trying to keep her composure. Joanna let out a sarcastic laugh, shaking her head dismissively. "Now you're watching me too, is that it?" Beatrix stepped forward, determined to get straight to the point. "Joanna, we just want to understand what's going on here. 3 inmates have become pregnant, and now you. We know there's something going on here, and we need to know what." Joanna looked at them intensely, teasing them both. "Maybe you should stop meddling in other people's problems. I'm not telling you anything, so drop this little investigation of yours, or you'll have to deal with me. Do you hear me?" After casting one last threatening glance, Joanna turned and walked away, leaving Camille and Beatrix without answers once again. Back in the supervisor's office, the tension was palpable. Camille ran her hand through her hair, clearly restless. "This is getting out of hand. I'll have to notify the administration," she said, her voice firm. Beatrix nodded. "I think it's the best thing to do. They need to know, and maybe they can help us find a solution." The following day, a meeting was arranged with the prison administration. Camille and Beatrix were visibly tense as they entered the room where the directors were waiting for them with serious expressions. Camille began the meeting by reporting on the events of the last few weeks. Beatrix complimented her with documents and medical details about the inmates. When they mentioned the absence of intimate visits, the looks on the faces of those present became even more confused. "With all due respect," said Camille, taking a deep breath, "this situation is already looking ridiculous for us. 4 pregnant women in a place where this shouldn't be possible, and we have no idea how this is happening." After an uncomfortable silence, the prison warden finally broke the tense atmosphere. "We can't ignore this. We need to take action. We're going to step up surveillance and install cameras in every possible corner." The decision was unanimous. There would be no more unmonitored spaces. No corridor, passageway, or courtyard would be without cameras. It was the last attempt to solve the mystery. Over the next week, Beatrix and Camille spent countless hours monitoring the recordings. Every movement of the inmates, guards, and staff was analyzed in detail. But no matter how much they looked, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Everything was under apparent control, and the mystery continued. Beatrix, exhausted, rubbed her eyes as she once again reviewed the footage of the most recent shift. Camille, next to her, sighed deeply. "Camille, I don't know what to think anymore. We've analyzed every detail, and we didn't find anything." Camille shook her head in frustration. "I'm also starting to doubt that we'll find anything on the cameras. We've looked at everything from dawn to dusk, and nothing." The days became repetitive. Camille and Beatrix followed the same routine. They worked, and in their spare time immersed themselves in the recordings in search of answers. One afternoon, Beatrix was in the office reviewing medical records when Claire, the guard, came in accompanied by a young inmate. "Doctor, this is Louise. She's in pain, so I thought I'd bring her here," explained the guard, leading the inmate to the gurney. "Tell me what you're feeling, Louise." The young woman looked down and answered hesitantly. "I've been sick for days, my stomach hurts, and I feel pain all over my body. I can't eat properly or sleep," she said quietly. Beatrix watched her carefully. Something in Louise's posture suggested that she was hiding something. "I'm going to do an ultrasound to take a closer look at what's going on," said Beatrix, already suspecting what she would find. Minutes later, the suspicion was confirmed. Louise was also pregnant. "Louise, you're pregnant," said Beatrix, already thinking about how she would tell Camille that a 5th girl was pregnant. On hearing the news, the young woman opened her mouth, but no words came out. Instead, she began to tremble, and then burst into tears, sobbing uncontrollably. Beatrix took a deep breath before turning to the guard. "Claire, please go to Supervisor Camille and tell her we have one more," she asked, trying to control the tension in her voice. Claire wasted no time. With a quick nod, she left the room while Beatrix remained there, staring at Louise, who was still crying, her tears streaming down her face. "Louise, it's all right. You can trust me. Tell me what's going on. You're safe here," said Beatrix in a calm and reassuring tone. With trembling hands, Louise wiped her face and in a whisper laden with guilt confessed, I made a mistake. I did something very wrong." Before she could continue, the door opened and Camille entered, accompanied by Claire. Camille walked into the room, watching Louise with a mixture of curiosity and seriousness. Crossing her arms, she looked questioningly at Beatrix, who responded with a slight nod indicating that the situation was delicate. "Louise, we're here to help. You can tell us. We'll listen, said Camille, softening her tone to reassure the young woman. Louise took a deep breath as if she was gathering the courage she needed to open her heart. Her eyes moved from Beatrix to Camille, hesitating as if she feared that her words would be discredited. You're watching us. Everyone here knows it. But the problem is that you're looking in the wrong place, she confessed, her voice low and full of uncertainty. Camille frowned, leaning forward slightly to hear better. What do you mean? What do you mean, wrong place? She asked, not hiding her growing curiosity. Louise looked away, visibly nervous, and after a long silence she revealed, It's not the people here who are doing this. It's the men from outside. The revelation left Beatrix and Camille stunned. They exchanged incredulous glances before Camille moved even closer to the young woman. Are you saying there are men coming from outside the prison? How can that be possible? Camille asked, trying to remain calm in the face of what she had just heard. Louise lowered her head, her words coming out almost in a whisper. Technically, they're not from outside. You'll understand if you look at the courtyard there, between the bushes and the stone benches where Joanna and the others always hang out. Beatrix and Camille were shocked. The information seemed absurd, but it explained part of the puzzle that had been tormenting them for weeks. Louise, are you sure? Are there men hiding in the courtyard? Camille asked, her expression grave. Louise nodded almost without raising her eyes. They're not hiding. You'll see if you look closely. Despite the young woman's hesitant tone, something in her expression frightened Beatrix and Camille. It was the fear in Louise's eyes that made everything more real. So that's why so many women are pregnant. Do these meetings take place there? Camille asked, still trying to understand what she was hearing. Louise bit her lip, visibly uncomfortable. Please don't go there when everyone's in the courtyard. If Joanna finds out I told you, I don't know what she'll do, she murmured, almost begging. After the confession, Louise left the room, ending the conversation. Beatrix and Camille exchanged glances, realizing that this was the most concrete clue they had so far. We need to check the cameras. We'll look for the exact spot she mentioned. If there is anything there, we need to see it now, said Camille decisively. Beatrix nodded, her heart racing. It seemed that they were finally close to unraveling the mystery that had tormented them for so long. A few minutes later, they were both in front of the monitor screen, carefully observing the images captured by the cameras. They adjusted the focus to the corner of the courtyard mentioned by Louise, between the bushes and the stone benches. For the first few minutes, everything seemed normal. The inmates chatted, sat on benches, and walked around the courtyard. But then Beatrix noticed something peculiar. Wait, she said, pointing at the screen. There were 4 women there just now. Now there are only 3. Camille replayed the recorded video, narrowing her eyes to focus better on the images. You're right. One of them has disappeared into the bushes. We need to see where she went, said Camille, as they both continued to watch. For 30 minutes, they watched the 3 remaining inmates, who seemed to be on the alert as if they were watching something. Then the missing inmate appeared back among the bushes as if nothing had happened. Beatrix held her breath, feeling the tension rise. Camille, I think we found what we were looking for. We need to go there. They waited until the courtyard was empty at the end of the day. Once all the prisoners were back in the cells, Camille and Beatrix left the monitoring room and headed towards the indicated location. When they reached the bushes, Camille carefully pushed aside the leaves and found something unexpected. A small opening in the ground, almost invisible amidst the undergrowth. Beatrix, look, we found it, Camille called out in surprise. Beatrix bent down, and her eyes widened when she realized that it was a narrow, well-hidden tunnel. A tunnel, all this time, right under our noses. They quickly called some guards to go down the tunnel and investigate where it led. The guards followed the narrow path and after a few minutes returned with the long-awaited answer. The tunnel connected the courtyard of the women's penitentiary to the courtyard of the men's penitentiary. Camille, Beatrix, and the guards burst into laughter as soon as they understood what was happening. So that's it, Camille commented, wiping away tears of laughter. The mystery of the pregnant women was actually a clandestine romance between the prisoners in the 2 wings. According to the guards, the tunnel seemed to be the result of an old escape attempt, but it ended up failing. Instead of taking the prisoners out of the prison, they dug towards the opposite wing, creating a secret link between the 2 penitentiaries. There, in the narrow, hidden tunnel, a couple of prisoners met regularly, taking advantage of the chance and luck of having discovered that passage. With constant encounters and no contraceptive protection, the inevitable result was that several of the inmates ended up getting pregnant. Camille and Beatrix informed the management of both prisons of what had happened. After a long discussion about how to proceed, the decision was simple and effective. closed the two entrances to the tunnel, preventing further secret meetings and consequently new unexpected pregnancies. As an alternative, the administrations decided to organize intimate visits on specific days of the month, ensuring that these meetings took place in a safe and controlled manner, with the necessary privacy to avoid future problems. In the months that followed, Camille and Beatrix closely followed the resolution of the consequences of that mystery. The 5 babies born in prison were handed over to the inmates' families, who would be responsible for looking after the children while the mothers served their sentences. With the tunnel duly closed and the intimate visit system up and running, the routine in the penitentiary seemed to have returned to normal. The mystery of the pregnant women had become a funny story full of lessons, told with great laughter at meetings and team gatherings, as a reminder that the truth is often simpler than we imagine. However complex certain mysteries may seem, the answers may be right in front of us. Patience, persistence, and the search for the truth always bring the answers we seek in the end.